She found him in a pool of shattered glass and crimson, clutching two car seats like they were the only things keeping him tethered to this world. He was dying, and he was aiming a gun straight at her heart. The cold autumn rain had been hammering the city's industrial district for 3 hours straight. The kind of October rain that turned concrete into ice and soaked straight through thin delivery jackets. Beth Morgan Jones watched the windshield wipers lose their battle against the downpour, her breath fogging the inside of her aging sedan. The dashboard clock glowed 11:47 p.m. She'd been on the road since 4 that afternoon, her nursing school classes until 8, then straight into the delivery app grind. She'd started medical school 3 years ago before switching to nursing when the money ran out. In the end, grief made her drop out entirely. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers. Her stomach had been empty since the gas station coffee she'd forced down that morning, saving the granola bar in her glove box for tomorrow's breakfast. The app pinged. "You have arrived. Delivered to loading dock, rear entrance. $20 tip." Beth's chest tightened with something close to relief. That tip meant her electricity bill paid on time, not another late fee. It meant heat this winter. She grabbed the thermal bag from the passenger seat. Gourmet pizza order, the kind of midnight craving only someone with money to burn would indulge. The receipt showed $85 for artisan pizza that would probably sit in someone's executive office fridge until it went stale. Beth killed the engine. The silence was immediate and wrong. No hum of machinery, no security lights sweeping the lot, just the percussion of rain on metal and the distant groan of the highway. She'd delivered to industrial complexes before. They usually had guards, cameras, that mechanical buzz of a place that never truly slept. This one felt abandoned. "Hello. Just drop it and go," she thought. But then she heard it, babies crying in the darkness. And Beth's feet moved before her brain could stop them, because she'd spent 5 years running from the memory of holding her baby brother's hand while he gasped for air, and she was done running from people who needed her. The baby's cries led her through the loading dock entrance, past rusted machinery and forgotten pallets. The pizza bag felt absurdly heavy in her hands. Her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness in weak, trembling arcs. She found him in a pool of shattered glass and crimson, clutching two car seats like they were the only things keeping him tethered to this world. He was dying, and he was aiming a gun straight at her heart. Beth froze. The man's face was pale gray, his breathing shallow and wet. Blood spread beneath him in a dark lake, still spreading. But his gun hand didn't shake. Neither did his eyes, sharp, calculating even through the pain. The babies screamed, their tiny fists waving from inside the car seats clutched against his chest. "Don't." His voice was gravel and broken glass. "Don't move." Beth's hands went up slowly, the pizza bag slipping to the concrete. Her nursing training kicked in before fear could stop her. Tracking the blood loss, the positioning of his body, the way he held his left side. Gunshot wound. Upper abdomen, maybe liver involvement. Minutes, not hours. "You need a hospital," she heard herself say. "Can't." He coughed and blood flecked his lips. The gun wavered. One of the babies shrieked louder, a sound of pure hunger and terror. "Doors are locked." From outside. Beth's eyes flicked to the entrance she'd come through. He was trapped. They all were. When did they last eat? The words came out before she could stop them. 9 hours. His jaw clenched. "I can't let them." The gun dropped an inch. His face twisted with something beyond physical pain. Beth saw it then, the expensive suit soaked through with blood, the military-grade tactical vest beneath, the way he still kept his body between the babies and the door. This man had killed to protect these children. He would kill her too if she made the wrong move. But those babies were starving and he was dying. "I'm a nursing student," Beth said quietly, lowering her hands. "I can help." "You should run." But his eyes were desperate, begging. "Yeah, I should." Beth took one step forward. The gun lifted. She took another. "But those babies need food, and you need someone to keep you alive long enough to take care of them. Please." The word cracked coming out of him. A dying man's last prayer. Beth dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already reaching for his wound. "Okay, but we need to move now. My car's outside. Can you walk?" Have to. Loading them into her sedan was a nightmare choreographed in rain and blood. Beth buckled the car seats in back while Chris John Becker, she'd seen his ID when checking his pulse, leaned against her trunk, one hand pressed to his side, the other still holding his gun. The tactical vest had saved his life once already. She counted 3 bullet impacts that hadn't penetrated. He collapsed into the passenger seat. Beth's hands shook on the steering wheel as she pulled out of the lot. This was insane. She should drive to the hospital, call the police. Instead, she drove to her studio apartment, because something about the way he'd said please had broken something open inside her chest. In her tiny bathroom, with makeshift supplies and half-remembered textbooks, Beth extracted the bullet. Chris bit down on a leather belt and didn't scream. The twins screamed enough for all of them. When she finally tied off the last stitch, his hand caught her wrist. Blood on both their hands now. Thank you. His voice was raw. I owe you everything. Beth looked at the babies, finally quiet now with formula warming, and the dangerous man bleeding on her bathroom floor, and knew her life had just split into before and after. Beth risked everything for 2 babies left to die in a box. She could have walked away, but she didn't. She chose compassion over safety, family over survival, hope over fear. Those twins are alive because one delivery driver refused to be a bystander. Now I have to ask, what kind of person are you? The kind who scrolls past stories about desperate children and ordinary heroes without a second thought? Or the kind who takes 2 seconds to hit subscribe and show that kindness still matters? If Beth could save 2 lives at gunpoint, you can click a button. Subscribe. Comment below what you'd have done in her position. Share this with someone who needs to remember that good people still exist. Or don't. And wonder what that says about you. The choice is yours. Just like it was hers. Choose better. The apartment building's fluorescent hallway lights buzzed like dying insects as Beth half-carried, half-dragged Chris toward her door. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle and bone wrapped around whatever darkness he carried inside. The baby's carrier swung from her other arm, mercifully silent for now. 3rd floor, she muttered. Of course it's the 3rd floor. Could be worse, Chris managed through gritted teeth. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage, leaving a trail of dark drops on the stairs. Could be 5th. That's not funny. Wasn't meant to be. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the keys. Behind them, the stairwell door opened. Just a neighbor, an elderly woman with 2 grocery bags who took one look at them and hurried past without a word. Smart woman. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a delivery driver barely making rent. Cramped, cluttered, held together by determination and duct tape. Thrift store furniture. Dishes in the sink. A wall covered in photos of a young man with Beth's eyes and reckless smile. Chris's gaze lingered on those photos as she guided him toward the couch. Your brother? Don't. Her voice cut like wire. Sit. Bleed on the towel, not the couch. I'm not getting my deposit back as it is. She set the carrier on the coffee table, another thrift store rescue, scarred and stained, and the babies immediately began to fuss. The sound hit her like a physical thing, activating some primal response she didn't know she had. I need to. She looked between Chris and the infants, paralyzed by impossible priorities. Take care of them first. Chris leaned back, face pale but determined. I've had worse. Longer. That doesn't make this okay. Nothing about tonight is okay. She grabbed supplies from the kitchen. Formula she'd panic bought at a 24-hour convenience store, bottles she'd never used, instructions she barely understood. Her hands moved on autopilot while her mind raced through the same loop. What the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? What the hell am I doing? The babies latched onto the bottles with desperate hunger, tiny fingers gripping air. They were so small. So impossibly fragile. Someone had left them in a box like trash, and now here they were in her apartment while a bleeding hitman sat on her couch, and somewhere out there, people were dead because of... You're spiraling. Chris's voice pulled her back. He was watching her with those unsettling pale eyes, reading her like she was transparent. I'm fine. You're not. And that's fine too. One of the babies, she'd started calling them Thing 1 and Thing 2 in her head, which probably made her a terrible person, finished the bottle and immediately spit up. White liquid dribbled down her shirt. She didn't even care anymore. "I need to look at that wound," she said, setting the babies back in their carrier. They fussed but didn't cry, as if they understood the gravity of their situation. "Take off your shirt." Chris complied without modesty, peeling away the ruined fabric to reveal a landscape of violence. The fresh bullet wound was bad, high on his left shoulder, still bleeding, but it was the other scars that made her stomach drop. Burns. Knife wounds. What looked like shrapnel marks across his ribs. Jesus Christ. Afghanistan mostly. He followed her gaze. Some from later work. Occupational hazards. Beth grabbed her first aid kit. The good one, the one she'd assembled after her brother's accident because she'd sworn she'd never be helpless again. Tweezers, surgical thread, antiseptic, local anesthetic she wasn't licensed to use but had anyway. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts. Do it." She worked in focused silence, the same way she'd learned in the EMT classes she'd taken and couldn't afford to finish. Probing for the bullet, feeling Chris's muscles tense beneath her hands but hearing no sound of pain. The metal came out clean, through and through, no fragments. "Lucky," she muttered. "I don't believe in luck." "Then what do you call tonight?" "Calculated intervention." She paused, thread half pulled through his skin. "What does that mean?" Chris was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photos on her wall. When he spoke, his voice was different, heavier, carrying weight she couldn't quite measure. "The delivery wasn't random, Beth. Neither was the location." Her hands stilled completely. "What?" "Your app was hacked. Someone created a fake order, timed to pull a driver to that building at exactly 9:47 p.m. They needed someone to unlock the door from outside. Someone disposable." The words landed like physical blows. Beth stepped back, thread dangling from her needle. That can't be. The order. What was it?" She tried to remember through the fog of shock. "Diapers. Formula. Some clothes. For apartment 4C. There is no apartment 4C in that building. It only goes to 3F. The room tilted. Beth grabbed the arm of the couch for balance. "You're saying they were going to use you as a key, then kill you as a witness. Standard protocol for this kind of operation." Chris's voice remained calm, clinical. "I was there on separate business. Surveillance on a target who rented office space on the second floor. When I saw the setup, the waiting men, the fake order, the timing, I intervened." Intervened. The word felt absurd in her mouth. "You killed people. 5 men. All armed. All there to murder you once you'd served your purpose." Beth's legs gave out. She sat hard on the coffee table, barely registering Thing 2's startled cry. I can't, why would anyone?" "The building. It has state-of-the-art security, requires dual verification to enter after hours. But food delivery drivers are waved through automatically, especially ones carrying obvious supplies. You were the exploit. The human backdoor." She thought of the door clicking open. The dark lobby. How empty everything had felt. The men you killed. They were waiting in the stairwell. In the basement access. One in the alley behind your van. Chris's pale eyes held hers. "I cleared the building before you arrived. You never saw them because they were already dead. You saved my life." The words felt inadequate. "Without me even knowing I was in danger. That was the idea. And then you just, waited? Bled out on the street? I was extraction bound when the real target appeared. The man in the car." His jaw tightened. "That was Marcus Webb. My second in command. The one who burned me." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He was there for the same reason they needed me. The building. 4th floor. The real target lives in 4F, a witness in a federal case under protection. Webb was hired to eliminate him. He used the same window I provided by clearing the security, but I didn't know he'd be there. When I saw him." Chris touched his shoulder, wincing. Old wounds complicate things. Beth stared at this man on her couch, this killer who'd saved her life, who'd been betrayed by someone he trusted, who sat bleeding in her apartment while speaking about murder like it was paperwork. "Why tell me this?" she asked. Why not just, I don't know, disappear? Leave me thinking it was all random? Because you deserve to know what you survived. And because, he paused, something shifting in his expression. Because I'm tired of lies. The babies chose that moment to start crying in earnest, hungry again or wet or just overwhelmed by their impossible circumstances. Beth moved automatically, lifting them from the carrier, checking diapers with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I need to finish your stitches, she said. After. They need you more. So she changed diapers on her coffee table, using supplies bought in a panic at 2 a.m., while a professional killer bled on her couch, and somewhere in the city, people were probably looking for both of them. The absurdity should have broken her, but instead, she felt oddly calm. My brother died because I didn't know enough, she heard herself say. He was into something, I don't even know what. Drugs, maybe, or debt. He wouldn't tell me. Said it was safer if I didn't know. She secured a diaper with shaking hands. They killed him anyway. I came home and found him on the kitchen floor, and I didn't know enough to save him because he wouldn't let me know enough to help him in the first place. Chris watched her work, his expression unreadable. Knowledge is a weapon, he said quietly. Sometimes the kindest thing is to keep it sheathed. And sometimes people die because the people who love them are kept in the dark. Yes. She finished with the babies and returned to his wound, threading the needle again. Her hands were steadier now, purpose overriding panic. You're dangerous, she said, pulling the first stitch tight. Says the woman who just extracted a bullet from a hitman in her living room. I'm a delivery driver. You're an EMT dropout with steady hands and questionable survival instincts. He watched her work. That makes you dangerous too. I never finished the certification. Couldn't afford it. Training is training. Money doesn't make skills less real. She worked in silence, stitching the wound closed with neat, efficient movements. The act was almost meditative, this small thing she could control, this damage she could repair. When she finished, she bandaged it properly, then cleaned up the blood and supplies with mechanical precision. You should sleep, Chris said. It's almost dawn. On what planet would I be able to sleep? The one where you've been awake for 20 hours and just experienced significant trauma. Your body will shut down whether you want it to or not. He was right. Exhaustion hit her like a physical weight, dragging at her bones. But the thought of sleeping while he was here, while babies needed care, while people were possibly hunting them both. I'll watch them, Chris said, reading her again. Get a few hours. I'm not going anywhere. You're wounded. I'm functional. And I'm the one with the most training for this particular situation. Caring for infants? Perimeter security. He shifted on the couch, grimacing. Though I've done field medic work. Can handle basic infant care if needed. Beth looked at the babies, asleep again in their carrier, impossibly small and vulnerable. Then at Chris, pale and wounded but alert, those predator eyes scanning the apartment's sight lines. I'll take the chair, she said. By the door. Last line of defense. Something flickered across his face. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You understand tactical thinking. I understand that if someone comes through that door, I want to be between them and these babies. She grabbed a blanket from her bedroom, settled into the worn armchair facing the apartment entrance. Wake me if anything happens. Nothing will happen. But yes. She closed her eyes, exhausted beyond reason, and felt herself sliding toward unconsciousness. Just before she went under, she heard Chris speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. For what? For not being afraid of me. Beth opened her eyes to find him watching her in the gray pre-dawn light filtering through the curtains. I am afraid of you, she said honestly. But I'm more afraid of what happens if I don't trust anyone. My brother died alone because he wouldn't let me in. I won't make that mistake again. Chris held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Get some sleep, Beth. I'll keep watch. And despite everything, the bodies, the blood, the impossibility of their situation, she did. She slept with her back to the door, trusting a killer to guard her life, while two abandoned babies dreamed in their carrier and the city beyond the windows began to wake. In the morning, everything would be different. They would have to figure out what to do with the babies, where to go, how to survive what was coming. But for now, in this small pocket of sanctuary carved from chaos, they had this: a shared darkness, a mutual understanding of loss, and the fragile beginning of something that might, against all odds, be trust. The last thing Beth saw before sleep claimed her was Chris's silhouette against the window, standing guard like a sentinel, his wounded shoulder barely slowing him down as he maintained his vigil. "You're dangerous," she'd said. But so was she. Dangerous enough to care when caring was stupid. Dangerous enough to trust when trust was suicide. Dangerous enough to believe that sometimes, in the darkest places, you found the only people who really understood. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The city continued its violent rhythms, indifferent to the small miracles and impossible choices being made in a third-floor walk-up. And in that apartment, 3 people who'd survived the night began to dream of surviving whatever came next. 3 days passed like a fever dream. Beth learned the baby's different cries: hunger, discomfort, fear. She memorized the rhythm of Chris's breathing, knew when fever spiked from infection, when to change bandages, when to force antibiotics down his throat. He protested once. She told him to shut up or bleed out, his choice. He chose to live. On day 2, she woke to warmth. Actual warmth, not the usual bone-deep cold of her apartment in November. "You fixed my heater?" She found him by the radiator, tools borrowed from somewhere, his wounded shoulder carefully braced. "You were freezing," he said simply, like it explained everything. Maybe it did. They existed in strange domesticity, her feeding babies at 3 a.m. while he stood watch, him changing diapers with military precision while she grabbed desperate minutes of sleep. He never touched her beyond necessity, maintained careful distance, but she felt his presence like gravity. On day 3 the formula ran out. "I'll go," Beth said, already grabbing her jacket. "It's not safe." "Nothing's safe. But those babies need to eat and you can barely stand." She met his pale eyes. "I'll be quick. 20 minutes, in and out." The corner store was fluorescent bright, normal, surreal. Beth grabbed formula, diapers, grabbed everything they'd need for another week of hiding. At the register, her card declined. "I've got it." An elegant woman behind her, designer coat, kind smile. She paid before Beth could protest. "We've all been there, sweetheart." Beth felt it then, wrongness like static before lightning. Outside, a man in a gray jacket followed 3 steps behind. She took a random turn. He followed. She started running, bursting through her apartment door, breathless. "We're blown." Someone at the store. Chris was already moving, checking sight lines, weapons appearing from places she didn't know he'd hidden them. 2 hours later, the baby started seizing. "No, no, no, and no." Beth grabbed the first one, its small body rigid, foam at its lips. The formula. The woman. The kindness that was poison. Beth. She worked on pure instinct, half-remembered training, desperate improvisation. Gastric lavage with a tube from her medical kit, saline solution, her fingers down their tiny throats inducing vomiting, Chris holding their convulsing bodies steady while she worked miracles with nothing. "Stay with me," she whispered, breathing for them, massaging their small chests. "Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me." When they finally gasped and cried, beautiful, horrible crying, Beth collapsed against the wall, covered in vomit and tears and terror. Chris slid down beside her, pulling her against his chest. They shook together, his control shattered, her strength exhausted. "I owe you everything." His voice broke on every word. "My children, my life. It's all yours now. Everything I have, everything I am. Yours." She turned to look at him and saw a man completely unmade. "We're not done yet," she said. "I know. That's why I'm giving you this." He pressed something into her hand, a phone, encrypted. "One call on here reaches people who can help." "But Beth," his fingers closed over hers. "Once you make it, there's no going back. You'll be part of this world. My world." She looked at the babies, breathing steadily now, alive because she'd refused to let them die. Looked at Chris, this killer who fixed her heater because she was cold. "I've been part of it since the moment I answered that delivery order," she said. "We just didn't know it yet." Outside, footsteps in the hallway. They both froze. The moment of choice had arrived. Black SUVs herded them into the parking garage. Concrete tomb, no escape. Masked hunters surrounded them. One stopped the attack, removed her mask. Sarah, what are you doing here? Beth's world shattered. Paying off gambling debts. Protecting you. Her sister's gun trembled. I tried to separate you from him. Gunfire erupted. Sarah stepped into the bullets meant for Beth and Chris. What? Twice. I love you, Beth, Sarah whispered, dying. Choose them. Chris pulled Beth away from her sister's body. The motel was the kind of place that didn't ask questions. Cash only, flickering neon, doors that locked from the inside with chains that wouldn't stop anyone determined. Beth had the sick twin pressed against her chest, feeling the fever burn through the thin onesie. She needs a doctor, Beth said for the third time. Hospital means records. Records mean we're dead by morning. Chris checked the window again, gun never leaving his hand. Give it another hour. Fever might break. And if it doesn't? The knock at the door froze them both. Chris moved with lethal precision, positioning himself, weapon raised. Who is it? Hello, darling. The voice was silk and poison. I think we need to talk. He went pale. Actually pale, which Beth hadn't thought possible. No. You're dead. I buried you. You buried an empty casket. The door opened, unlocked because of course she had keys. The woman who entered was beautiful the way knives are beautiful. Sharp, purposeful, deadly. Designer clothes, perfect hair, eyes like glacial ice. Surprise. Victoria. Chris's gun didn't waver. How? How am I alive? Careful planning. How did I find you? You're predictable when you're protecting something. Victoria's gaze slid to Beth, assessed her in one clinical sweep, dismissed her. The delivery girl. How quaint. Get out. Chris's voice was dead calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. I need the offshore account codes, Christopher. The ones only you know. The ones that represent 18 years of syndicate operations. Victoria smiled. I'd prefer cooperation, but I'm flexible. Two men entered behind her, armed, professional. You orchestrated the coup, Chris said. The betrayal, Marcus, everything. I orchestrated my freedom from a man who thought honor mattered more than power. Victoria's mask slipped, showing something raw beneath. You could have ruled the syndicate, but you wanted to be good. To save people. To play hero with trafficking victims while the empire crumbled. She moved to the carrier, picked up the feverish twin with clinical detachment. Don't. Beth stepped forward, froze when a gun pressed against her temple. These aren't even your biological children, Victoria continued, holding the burning baby like evidence. Rescued from some trafficking ring, raised as your own. Your weakness made flesh. She walked to the balcony door. The codes, Christopher. Or I drop her. Beth was already moving. The bathroom door, the lamp in her hand, the guard's temple. He dropped. She spun, caught the second guard's gun hand, drove her knee into his groin. The gun clattered. Chris was on Victoria, had the baby safe before she could react. Then 3 guns pointed at Victoria's head. The delivery girl who just saved my ass, Chris said, something like pride in his voice. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. Well, this is unexpected. They zip-tied Victoria to the chair. The sick twin was getting worse, tiny body shaking with fever. Beth paced, making calculations she never thought she'd make. She has connections, Beth said. Medical contacts who won't ask questions. You want to trust her? I want to save this baby. Beth looked at Victoria. You want those codes? Get me antibiotics, fever reducers, and everything on this list. Then we'll talk. Victoria studied her with new interest. You're pragmatic. I like that. I don't give a damn what you like. Can you do it or not? Give me a phone. I'll have supplies here in 20 minutes. It was surreal. Beth administering medicine procured by the woman who tried to kill them, Victoria watching with clinical fascination, Chris maintaining armed guard while babies slept in their carrier. They're not yours biologically? Beth asked quietly, checking the twins' temperature. Chris was silent for a long moment. I found them in a shipping container. 6 weeks old, left to die after their parents were killed. The ring was moving them to buyers. His jaw tightened. I burned the ring down, killed everyone involved, took the children, and raised them, and loved them. Victoria snorted from her chair. See? Weakness. Sentiment. That's why I faked my death and took control. The syndicate needs someone willing to make hard choices. Like dropping babies from balconies? Beth met her eyes. You're coming with us. Evidence. Leverage. Insurance. I'm your prisoner? You're our problem. Beth finished with the medication, felt the fever already dropping. And right now you're more valuable alive than dead. Congratulations. You just became our hostage. Victoria smiled, genuinely amused. I trained as a hostage negotiator. This should be interesting. Chris looked between them. His supposedly dead wife, the delivery driver who just calculated revenge versus survival and chosen survival. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The fever broke. The baby slept. And in a cheap motel room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation, 3 people who should have been killing each other reached an agreement born of pure necessity. Tomorrow they'd figure out what to do with a dead wife who refused to stay buried. Tonight they'd keep the babies alive. Sometimes that was all the victory anyone could hope for. The phone call came at dawn. Chris. Marcus's voice was rough, urgent. Council's meeting in 8 hours. Vote on succession. If you don't show, you're declared dead and they carve up your territory. Chris's jaw tightened. I'll be there. There's more. $5 million bounty. Open contract. Every hunter in 4 states is already moving. Beth felt the words like physical weight. 8 hours. 5 million reasons to die. Chris ended the call, turned to her with that careful expression she'd learned meant he was making decisions about her survival without asking her opinion. Don't, she said. I haven't said anything. You're going to tell me to run. That you'll lead them away, be the distraction, give me time to disappear with the twins. Beth met his eyes. Don't. Beth. We go together. We end this together. She stood, walked to where Victoria sat zip-tied, still smirking. I'm done running. Done being small. Done letting people make choices about my survival like I'm something to be protected instead of someone who fights. Chris studied her for a long moment. This isn't your fight. The second I answered that delivery order, it became my fight. The second I stitched your wound, fed your children, left my sister's body in a parking garage, her voice cracked but held. This is my fight now. Evolution or extinction. We choose together. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Respect. Something deeper that made her chest ache. Okay, he said simply. Together. Mrs. Chin didn't ask questions when Beth appeared at her door with 2 babies and a desperate request. The elderly woman just nodded, accepted the carrier, the supplies, the mace Beth pressed into her weathered hands. Anyone tries that door, you scream, Beth said. Police, fire department, everyone. Make noise. These your babies now? Mrs. Chin asked, rocking the carrier gently. They're mine to protect. Then you come back for them. They need their mother. The word hit Beth like a blow. Mother. She wasn't, not really, but I'll come back, she promised, knowing she might be lying. They drove toward the meeting location in stolen silence. Victoria was secured in a safe house with 2 of Marcus's remaining loyal men. The twins were hidden. Everything else was stripped away until only this remained. Chris and Beth, 8 hours, 5 million reasons to fail. Pull over, Beth said suddenly. Chris obeyed without question, killing the engine on a deserted access road. Trees pressed close. No witnesses. No time. Beth. She kissed him. Hard, desperate, tasting fear and determination and the metallic edge of violence. His hands found her waist, pulled her across the console, and suddenly they were tearing at clothes, at barriers, at the space between them. This will mark you, Chris said against her throat, his control fracturing. Change everything. There's no going back. Maybe I want to be marked by this. Beth's hands traced the scars on his chest, the map of violence that made him who he was. Maybe I'm tired of being unmarked. Invisible. Safe. Then let me show you what dangerous looks like. It wasn't gentle. Wasn't sweet or romantic or any of the things she'd imagined in the abstract concept of first times. It was desperate and hungry and real. Two people proving to themselves they were still alive, still human, still capable of feeling something beyond fear. After breathing hard, tangled together in the cramped space, Beth laughed. Actually laughed. What? Chris's thumb traced her cheekbone. I just had sex in a stolen car while there's a $5 million bounty on our heads and we're driving toward a meeting that will probably get us killed. Regrets. She looked at him. This killer who'd saved her life, who'd let her in, who'd trusted her with everything including his children and his broken heart. Not even one. 6 hours remained. They drove toward extinction or evolution, marked by each other, choosing the fight together. Outside, the city waited. Inside, they'd already won something the syndicate could never take. The industrial complex looked different in daylight. Same broken windows, same blood-stained concrete, but transformed by context. This time, Beth walked through the front door beside Chris, Victoria zip-tied between them, and she wasn't afraid. Full circle. Back to where it all began, but everything had changed. The Council of 10 sat around a scarred conference table. Old men mostly, a few women, all carrying the weight of violence like expensive suits. They watched Beth with predator eyes, calculating her value, her threat level, her disposability. Christopher. The oldest one spoke, voice like gravel. You're alive. Surprising. Victoria orchestrated the coup. Chris pushed her forward. She faked her death, turned my second in command, tried to seize control through betrayal. Clever, another council member said. But prove it. Beth stepped forward, placed the hacked phone on the table. Messages. Financial transactions. Kill orders. All traceable to her. She violated your code, betrayed from within rather than challenging openly. They examined the evidence in silence. Finally, the old man nodded. Victoria Chin, you're sentenced to death for violation of syndicate law. Victoria didn't flinch. Worth a try. Then the old man's eyes shifted to Beth. Which brings us to the witness problem. You've seen too much. Know too much. Witnesses are liabilities. The room temperature dropped. 6 guns came out aimed at Beth. Chris moved faster than thought. 3 shots. 3 bodies dropped before anyone could react. His gun swung to cover the remaining 7 council members, fingers steady on the trigger. New rule, he said, voice dead calm. The woman lives. Anyone who argues dies next. Chaos erupted, shouts, weapons drawn, chairs scraping. Chris didn't move, didn't blink, a man willing to burn down his entire world rather than let Beth die. And Beth stepped between him and the guns. Put them down, she said. Not to Chris. To the council. Girl, you're insane. You need leadership. Someone who understands the old ways but isn't trapped by them. She met each pair of eyes, unflinching. Your organization is bleeding money, losing territory, falling apart because you're fighting wars with 20th century rules in a digital age. And you can fix this? Skepticism dripped from every word. I can modernize you. Legitimize operations, create legal fronts, build infrastructure that doesn't leave bodies in parking garages and babies in boxes. Beth's voice hardened. Chris runs operations. He's proven his capability. I handle legitimization and evolution. Partnership. New structure. Or. The old man watched her with something like fascination. Or you die tonight, and we rebuild with people who understand what century we're living in. Beth smiled without warmth. Accept or die. Evolution or extinction. Choose fast. Silence stretched like wire. Then the old man started laughing, a sound like breaking glass. John would have respected you, he said, referencing Chris's dead mentor. You've got steel. Audacity. He looked around the table. I vote partnership. Anyone disagree? 3 council members lowered their weapons. Then 4. Then all of them. The old man stood, extended his hand to Beth. You've got 6 months to prove this works. Fail, and we revisit the liability conversation. Beth shook his hand, feeling the weight of violence and power transfer through that grip. I won't fail. No, he agreed, studying her. I don't think you will. Chris lowered his gun. Victoria smiled from her restraints. Outside, the city continued its violent rhythms, indifferent to the revolution just negotiated in a blood-stained room. But inside, everything had changed. The delivery driver who'd answered the wrong order had just become a syndicate leader. Evolution over extinction. Every single time. Mrs. Chin opened the door before Beth could knock, the twins already in her arms. They were good, the old woman said, studying Beth's face. You look different. I am different. Beth took the babies, felt their solid weight against her chest. Safe. Alive. Hers. Different good or different bad? Beth thought about the 3 bodies cooling in the industrial complex, the handshake with a crime lord, the power she'd claimed through audacity and desperation. Different necessary. Within 48 hours, the twins were installed in a safe house that made Fort Knox look casual. Armed security, panic rooms, medical staff on call. Beth hated the necessity of it, hated that these babies needed bodyguards before they could walk. But she'd learned the cost of being vulnerable. She was part of the machine now. The very system she'd once been unable to imagine touching. Regrets? Chris asked, watching her stare out the bulletproof windows at the city below. Constantly. But not about the choice. She turned to him. Victoria. What happens to her? Secure facility. Rehabilitation, theoretically. And actually? Depends on whether she cooperates or becomes a liability. His expression was carefully neutral. Your call. Your counsel now. The weight of that settled on her shoulders like lead. Life or death decisions. Her call. Rehabilitation, Beth said finally. 6 months, same as my probation. She earns her way back or she doesn't. But we don't kill her unless she forces our hand. Chris nodded. The old guard won't like it. They prefer permanent solutions. The old guard can adapt or retire. Beth smiled without warmth. Evolution, remember? The first month was a masterclass in impossible choices. A lieutenant skimmed funds, execution or exile. Beth chose exile with monitoring. A rival syndicate tested their boundaries, full war or targeted response. Beth engineered a negotiation that cost money but saved lives. Each decision felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss, knowing one wrong step meant plummeting back to the violence she was trying to contain. You're bleeding them dry with mercy, one council member complained. I'm keeping us out of federal investigations with strategic thinking, Beth countered. Your way gets us all killed or imprisoned. Mine gets us rich and invisible. The numbers backed her up. Civilian casualties down 40%. Police attention down 30%. Profit margins up 25% through legitimate front operations she'd established using her delivery logistics background. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. She learned Chris's history in fragments. Marines, Force Recon, 3 tours in Afghanistan before the syndicate recruited him for wet work. He tried to leave twice. Both times they'd threatened people he loved. I stopped loving people after that, he said one night, feeding one twin while she handled the other. Safer that way. And now I'm compromised again. He met her eyes. You and these children. My weakness made flesh. Victoria said the same thing. Victoria was right. About that, at least. Chris shifted the baby to his shoulder, patting her back with practiced gentleness. The difference is I've learned weakness is also strength. Connection is armor, not vulnerability. Poetic for a hitman. Reformed hitman. Now I'm a logistics coordinator with homicidal skills. Beth laughed, startling both babies. Is that what we're calling it? That's what the tax returns call it. 3 months in, Beth stood in the industrial complex again, renovated now, legitimate office space for their freight company. She touched the spot where she'd first found Chris bleeding, where everything had changed. Thinking about running? Chris appeared beside her, always too quiet for someone so dangerous. Thinking about how far we've come. She looked at him. I was just a delivery driver. Now I'm a queen who never wanted the crown, he finished. Someone who took power because someone had to. Someone harder than she ever thought she could be. Is that a compliment? It's recognition. Chris took her hand, rare public gesture. You're exactly what this organization needed. Someone who understands morality isn't black and white, but refuses to let it become entirely gray. Beth squeezed his hand, thinking of the twins at home, the empire they were reshaping, the impossible balance between violence and peace. She'd never wanted this crown, never imagined wearing it. But she wore it anyway, making impossible choices, dragging the darkness toward light one decision at a time. Evolution over extinction. Every single day. The penthouse windows stretched floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city that had once swallowed Beth whole. Now she stood above it, coffee in hand, watching dawn break over skyline that looked nothing like the view from her old studio apartment. 3 months. 90 days since the council meeting. A lifetime since the night a fake pizza order changed everything. Behind her, one of the twins squealed with delight. Lucy, they'd named her, and her brother Michael. Real names for real children who deserved better than Thing 1 and Thing 2. They were sitting up now, reaching for toys, discovering their voices in babbles that sounded almost like words. Normal baby things in an abnormal world. You're thinking too loud again. Chris appeared beside her, 2 mugs in hand, replacing her cold coffee with fresh. Small intimacies that meant everything. Just remembering. The apartment? The girl who lived there. Beth smiled. She feels like someone I used to know. Someone young and scared and drowning. She was stronger than she knew. She had to be. Beth watched a delivery van navigate the early morning streets below, some driver working the dawn shift, chasing tips and survival. 1 fake pizza order. 1 hacked app. That's all it took to change everything. Chris followed her gaze. Regrets. She'd lost her sister. Killed people or stood by while it happened. Become part of a criminal empire she'd once been too naive to imagine existed. Made impossible choices that kept her awake at night, weighing lives against lives, morality against survival. Not a single one, she said, meaning it. The syndicate still had enemies. The council still tested boundaries, though less frequently now that her legitimization strategies were paying dividends. Victoria was in her secure facility, cooperating more than expected, possibly because Beth visited monthly to check on her rehabilitation personally. The old guard grumbled but adapted. New blood integrated slowly. It was messy, imperfect, exhausting work. But the twins were safe, thriving, protected by security that would kill or die to keep them breathing. Lucy's asking for you, Chris said. Well, making sounds that might be your name or might be indigestion. Hard to tell at this age. Beth laughed, the sound coming easier now than it had months ago. That's my girl. Demanding and loud. Wonder where she gets that. Definitely from you. I'm a model of quiet restraint. You shot 3 council members. Quietly. With restraint. Chris smiled. Rare, genuine, the expression that still surprised her when it appeared. Come on. Your daughter's waiting. Your daughter. Not the baby or the child. Your daughter. The family she'd chosen and saved and built from ruins and desperation. Beth took his hand, the same hand that had once held a gun, that had killed to protect her, that now changed diapers and warmed bottles and held their family together through sheer determination. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no perfect endings in their world. Just survival, adaptation, the constant negotiation between violence and peace. But it was real. And it was hers. In the nursery, Lucy bounced in her playpen, arms reaching when Beth appeared. Michael followed his sister's lead, both of them demanding attention with the tyranny only babies could achieve. Beth scooped them up, one on each hip, feeling their solid weight, their warm breath, their absolute trust that she would keep them safe. Hey, my loves, she whispered. Did you miss me? Lucy grabbed her hair. Michael drooled on her shoulder. Chris leaned against the doorframe, watching his family with that careful expression that meant he was feeling things he didn't have words for. Outside, delivery drivers navigated the night's final hours. Somewhere out there, desperate people made impossible choices. Some would survive them. Some wouldn't. But here now, in this moment carved from chaos and violence and desperate hope, Beth Morgan Jones had everything she needed. A man who'd become more than she'd imagined. children she'd died to protect, purpose that went beyond survival. She'd been the girl who answered the wrong delivery order at exactly the right time. Now she was the woman who'd refused to let that moment destroy her. Evolution over extinction. Every single time. The city woke below them, indifferent to miracles and impossible survivals. But in the penthouse high above the streets where it all began, a family that shouldn't exist thrived anyway. Beth kissed Lucy's forehead, then Michael's, then met Chris's eyes across the room. No regrets. Not a single one.